Hello, Professor Renzo. My name is Adham Abdussalam, and I'm representing Team 4. First of all, we wanted to thank you for this assignment. We learned a lot from it, and it was so much fun that we actually wish that we would be working on this project for real. Um, we selected a company called Agreem, which is a B2B marketplace in the agriculture space in India. Reason why we selected them is because our team loves startups and loves social enterprise startups in specific, and Agreem happens to be both. When we started looking at Agreement, we did a little bit of research. We looked at their investment history, we looked at their company profile, their company values, and even their employees on LinkedIn. And that's when something really popped up. Around 30% of their 500 employees have open to work listed on their LinkedIn profile. This obviously means that they're going to have a lot of turnover in the very foreseeable future, which will, of course, impact their productivity, impact their ability to achieve their targets, and maybe even impact their ability to raise investments because they have such a high turnover. We also looked at the macro data in India, how much time on average it takes to replace a hire that left the company, the average salaries, and the cost that a company incurs when someone leaves. We estimate that if we help Agreem reduce their time to hire by around 30%, that would allow them to save up to $50,000 in losses that they incur because of delayed hiring per year. So we really wanted to help them with talent acquisition. So we came up with a list of projects, like set specific criteria and priorities, and gave each one of them weights. And we ended up selecting acquiring a new talent acquisition software to assist with their expecting hiring needs. So the project summary in a nutshell is Agreem forecast that they're going to need to hire around 120 people, if not more, to replace their outgoing talent, to help them optimize their talent acquisition process and manage it in a better way. We're going to be bringing on a much more powerful talent acquisition software than the one that they're currently using, which is called Zoho Recruit. And we've talked to several stakeholders, and luckily for us, one of our team members is actually an HR expert with experience in talent acquisition. So we have an educated estimation of what their requirements are going to be for that software. First off, the big goals. We want to reduce the time required for hiring by around 50%, include all of the required features in whatever software that we select. The selection and implementation must be done within a specific date. And we also want to improve the diversity, equity, and inclusion metrics for Agreem, which is something that they list on their website as one of their biggest priorities. These were the objectives that we listed. These were the success criteria for each one of those objectives. And finally, the requirements that we believe Agreem would have in whatever software that they end up selecting and the benefits that software would bring to Agreem. So as far as the project charter is concerned, we listed down pretty much what I just explained, the overview of the project, as well as the background of the project. And then we started breaking it down into milestones. We didn't want the list of milestones to be too long, but we wanted to make sure that each milestone is very specific. So we came up with these milestones, added delivery dates for each one, and acceptance criteria, and who's going to judge whether we hit those acceptance criteria or not. Moving beyond that, we do understand that there's risks and constraints, and we made certain assumptions. The major constraint, of course, Agreem is a startup, so it's going to be budgetary constraints. So we have to be frugal with the money that we spend. And the risks are with any new software, or with any change for that matter, is low adoption rate. We buy a new software, nobody uses it, that's a waste of money. But compared to the risk of not acquiring that software and leaving the delayed hiring times as they are now, that risk is still, it makes a lot of sense to take that risk, even if it exists. The resource estimation, as you can see here, is going to be the bulk of the cost is going to be allocated as far as man hours are concerned. And I'll get into further details as far as the budget is concerned a little bit later. But because there's so many stakeholders involved, we had to break them down and create engagement plans and communication plans, which I'd like to walk you through right now. The talent acquisition manager is obviously going to be the project manager. We definitely need the CEO to be the main engine behind pushing for the adoption of that software with all of the hiring managers, which would in this case be the customers for this project. And we remember what you said about pigs and chickens. The talent acquisition manager is obviously going to be a pig, but also the IT department, which is going to be responsible for integrating the new talent acquisition software with Agreem's current HR information system, as well as managing any potential cybersecurity threats. So those are going to be pigs as well, and the rest is going to be chickens. The project scope and the key deliverables are pretty simple. A, select the software. B, implement it and integrate it into Agreem. C, train everybody that's going to be using it to use it proficiently. And 4, track the software performance and make sure that it is achieving the goals that we set out for it to achieve. As I mentioned earlier, there's going to be a lot of stakeholders involved. So we made sure to list them down, list their impact, their influence, what they're going to be contributing, and create a very specific engagement strategy to make sure that all of the stakeholders are engaged adequately. That also led to a communication plan where we selected how often we're going to be communicating with each stakeholder, which mediums we're going to be using to communicate with them to ensure that everybody is getting the right amount of information to allow them to be up to date or contribute accordingly. The work breakdown structure came next. We split this, like the work breakdown structure was split into main activities, which are then fleshed out even more in detail in the Gantt chart. What resources we're committing to each one of those activities, how long it's going to take to complete each one of those activities, and an estimated cost. The project budget, as I mentioned earlier, you'll note here that the bulk of the cost is the man hours. I mentioned earlier that we're going to be able to save Agreem around $50,000 annually, but the cost here is $70,000. However, this is going to be a one-off cost for the most part. The training is a one-off cost. The implementation is a one-off cost. And given that this is a software that Agreem is going to be using for 3, 4, maybe even 5 years, the cost-benefit analysis makes a lot of sense still. Here's a Gantt chart that explains in further detail the main activities that I mentioned above. And you'll note here that unfortunately they have to be sequential. There's not a lot of room for managing multiple activities in parallel, which would have reduced the project duration or the project timeline. But unfortunately, since we can run multiple activities in parallel, they have to be sequential, which is why we have around 3 months as a timeline for the project. Finally, I mentioned earlier that the main risk was going to be low user adoption, but that doesn't mean that it's the only risk. The supplier could have delays, which would extend the implementation time. There's data security concerns. So we listed down all of the risks that we foresee, but also gave them probability of how likely is that risk to occur, and what are we going to do to mitigate said risk so that we can ensure that the project is moving forward smoothly and on time. That is essentially our project map and our planning for the entire acquisition of this new talent acquisition software. And just one quick note to mention at the end, we mirrored our team operating principles on Agreem's values, which they have listed on their website, obviously got everybody's signature, and added an appendix of where we got this information from and what Agreem does, what their aspirations are for the future, and why this acquisition of a new talent acquisition software is going to be so crucial to helping them achieve their goals. Thank you very much again, and have a wonderful day.